When We Disagree is a show about arguments, how we have them, why we have them, and their impact on our relationships and ourselves. Think of a group of people, maybe even just one person, whose political beliefs are the opposite of yours. Maybe you're opposed on everything: the president, taxes, foreign policy, even what shows to watch. Then ask yourself this deceptively simple question: why do they believe what they believe? What motivates them? There are only a few possible answers to this question. They are good people with different opinions. They are good people, but they're misinformed. They are ignorant, fearful, or confused. All the way to answers like this one. They are evil, and they wake up in the morning and they drink a tall glass of evil and become more evil as a result. For those that pick this last option to describe their political opponents, their opinions of themselves is often the polar opposite. Whereas their opponents are motivated by hate, they, these believers, are motivated by love. Researchers who study polarization call this discrepancy, quote, motive attribution asymmetry. It's a mouthful, but it means what motives do we ascribe to people who disagree with us, and what motives do we assign to ourselves, and how far apart are those assessments? How far apart are those good and evil motives? The farther apart they are, the harder societies have in living together peacefully. Researchers started using this phrase, motive attribution asymmetry, around 2014, 10 years ago, give or take, and two of the countries they then found as having the greatest motive attribution asymmetry were Israel and the United States. I'm Michael Lee, Professor of Communication and Director of the Civility Initiative at the College of Charleston. Our guest today on When We Disagree is McLeod. She's a South Carolina state senator and has been so for the past 8 years. She served 6 years in the South Carolina House of Representatives as well. She recently announced that she is no longer going to seek re-election. She can trace her South Carolina family lineage back 8 generations. She's the proud mom of 2 adult sons and the proud daughter of 2 amazing parents. Mia, tell us an argument story.
So my argument story happened in June of 2022. I, as you said, currently serve in the South Carolina Senate. And in the General Assembly, we appoint or elect judges. We appoint magistrates. We elect judges across South Carolina. People may not realize that we are in the minority of states that elects and appoints judges in that way. And so I received some paperwork one evening as I was sitting in my office at my desk, and it was an application for a judicial position that was open in the county that I represent. And I reviewed the information that was sent to me, and I realized that I did have some knowledge of the person who was applying or who was being recommended for the judicial position. And I did a little more research and discovered that this person did not meet the criteria for me serve in that position because of her lack of experience and qualifications. And so I contacted the senator who sent me the paperwork and asked me to sign, and told him that I wouldn't be able or willing to do that, and that he could still move her application forward because when I did a little more research, I also talked with our staff, and they said that her recommendation could move forward to the governor and she could be appointed to the judicial seat with it, as long as there was only one senator who was not willing to sign. So it wouldn't have prevented her from serving as a judge. I just wasn't comfortable endorsing it or putting my name on it.
So just to be clear, her path toward a judgeship was not impeded necessarily by you resisting or you weren't going to give her your endorsement, but she could still become a judge. And so then
Absolutely.
the conflict is
Absolutely.
about just this endorsement, but the endorsement may or may not have had any kind of material outcome.
Right. So the the um, the issue was that this applicant or
Mm.
the person who was being recommended by my colleague in the Senate was the wife or is the wife of another legislative
Here
colleague.
we go.
Yes. And so I have in the past, even when I served in the House, introduced legislation that would prevent us from appointing and electing family members. I think it does the general public a disservice to do that because our family members and people who are close to us have a built-in advantage over someone who is likely just as qualified, if not more qualified. And I just think that nepotism needs to stop. And so, um, the my colleague who recommended and was moving this application forward reached out to me to let me know that the applicant's husband was not happy
Mm-hmm.
about my refusal to sign her application and that he would be reaching out to me. And he did. And I reached back. I missed his call initially. I reached back out to him and thought that we would be able to have a candid conversation,
Uh-huh.
but a civil conversation. That was not the case. And
Yeah.
so
Just
I shared with him exactly what I've shared with you that
uh-huh.
I'm not comfortable signing off on your wife's judicial appointment. However, staff has advised me that her application can still be, can still move forward. And I am not um, going to stop it. If my colleague wants to push her application forward, that is his prerogative
Mm-hmm.
as as a member of the South Carolina Senate. And I'm just telling you what I'm unwilling to do as
Yeah.
as in terms of being a part of that process.
I'm struggling to figure out sitting here trying to put myself in your shoes on that call because it's difficult. It's one of these issues, nepotism, that's controversial, but you seldom hear somebody in public say, I think nepotism is really good and we should do more of it. Right.
Right.
And so I'm struggling to figure out what the arguments for the appointment of a person who's unqualified simply because of a personal relationship. And so basically, what was the argument about? Or was it just, I'm disappointed in you, you owe me this, or something like that?
Well, the the argument was really it really came down to when I make decisions like that,
Mm-hmm.
and, and quite frankly, it's been often a lot more often than it should have been.
Interesting.
But I always look at myself first, and try to think about my why.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? Is it reasonable? Is it purposeful? Does it serve
Mm-hmm.
a purpose that's significant to me? Is it justifiable? Can I defend it? Is it negotiable? Am I willing to kind of give or take or compromise on it? And the answers to those questions, if it, once I go through that process,
Yeah.
I'm pretty firm and fixed. I'm not willing to bend when it comes to my principles, and I explained that to him in the same tone and the same basic
Yeah.
in the same way that I'm explaining it right now. And he became enraged on the phone. I mean, cursing at me
Uh,
and you know, threatening, threatening me and saying that, I don't get to decide who's qualified because there's a test that these, and it's just a screening test
Yeah.
that tells the
Hmm.
tells whether the candidate, is able to even function in that capacity. And she passed the test, and that's great. But these judges, particularly here in South Carolina, deal with a myriad of really serious issues, including domestic violence, harassment, landlord tenant issues. I mean, they deal with life altering and sometimes life threatening
Yeah.
issues. And, as someone who started the Violence Against Women program here in South Carolina under Attorney General Charlie Condon at that time when I first graduated law school, I am acutely aware of the issues, particularly as it relates to domestic violence. And these judges have to be, I can't afford to appoint someone who simply passes a screening test.
This is one of
They,
these issues around which it also seems like there's not a lot of good arguments on the other side. In other words, you seldom hear people say, you know what we need are less qualified judges.
right,
So
right.
again, the conflict seems like a conflict between your principles and what this person assumed to be was deserved or perhaps standard practice. And so I wanted to follow up on that. And is was his outrage about the perception that you were stepping out of line and violating a kind of standard operating procedure in which nepotism is normal and expected part of politics in South Carolina or elsewhere?
Yes, I think so. I think because we were, as I saw it, on friendly terms prior to this. And he kept asking why I was doing this, as if I was, as if I were doing something intentionally to hurt him,
Yeah.
hurt his wife. And that couldn't have been further from the truth. It wasn't about them for me. It was about the principle. It was about, whether she could, in fact, whether I believed she was ready to step into that role in a way that would benefit my constituents, um, and truly serve my constituents. And I
Yeah.
just did not see that. There was no, when I asked myself those questions, is it reasonable? Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is my responsibility. I'm ultimately responsible for every judge I appoint, for every vote
Yeah.
that that I'm able to have as it relates to other judges in the larger um, General Assembly. Was it purposeful? Absolutely.
Hmm.
As I said, these issues are often life changing, life altering, life threatening for so many of my constituents. And we live in a state, South Carolina, we live in a state where, you know, women, we've been number one in the nation for women when it comes to women who are murdered by men in the state.
Mm.
And so our judges and law enforcement are often those two um, disciplines are often the game changers in that regard for
Hmm.
women and girls in our state. And, that's not something that I can take lightly, and I don't. And so it was justifiable.
Yeah.
Mind it was not negotiable.
Yeah.
Uh, I had already done, when I appoint anyone, I'm going to do the research and I'm going to look into, this person's background. And I didn't find anything, that was negative. I just saw someone who was inexperienced, and this would have been her first real job out of
Yeah.
college. And I just thought, wow, that
Well, did
she
she end
needs
up becoming a
help.
judge?
I'm sorry?
Did she end up becoming a judge?
No. And the reason she didn't end up becoming a judge is because the senator who initially forwarded her application to me to sign off on
Yeah.
later rescinded her application.
Hmm.
And so I don't know the why behind that. All I know is what, I shared with him, what I'm sharing with you. And because of that, I was the villain. I became the villain because, I wouldn't sign my name on her application. And so her husband, my legislative colleague, started coming for me. And it became this whole, how dare you not put, support my wife's effort to become a judge in this county, and I'm going to make you pay. And that was the position that he took.
In what ways could he, other than just being mean or uncivil, in what ways could that retribution have political or professional consequences?
Well, so initially, I continued to do what I do, and that is support um, my constituents in every way that I can.
Hmm.
And he sent me messages through other colleagues that my efforts to get certain bills through or to get to protect some of my other judges' judicial appointments, that he was going to make things really difficult for me. And then in 2021, I actually announced that I was running for governor of South Carolina, not knowing at the time that I would be the first Black woman to ever announce a run for governor in the state of South Carolina. And I wasn't able to officially file until 2022.
Hmm.
And so during that time, he sent me messages, oh, you're running for governor now. Maybe you want to change your mind about your decision not to support my wife in her appointment. Now, he never said these things to me
Hmm.
after the fact. He was irate on the phone. Like, I could not get a word in. I had to call his name several times just to get him to, calm down and hear me. But he sent messages through colleagues, and I let all of that go because it really, it didn't matter. And
Hmm.
so when I ran, though, in 2022, when I filed and it was official, he decided that his last ditch effort to pay me back
Hmm.
would be to hold a press conference, which he did on the second floor of the State House, and announce publicly that he was going to endorse my opponent. Um, that too didn't bother me because I expected it. What I didn't expect, though, was that he would try to, drag my name and stand, in this at his press conference and spew lies and all kinds of misinformation
Wow.
about who I am and about my work in the
Yeah.
legislature. And so I felt the need to respond to that, and I did on Twitter. I'm not necessarily proud of that, but I responded when I saw it. Several people sent me clips of the press conference, and when I saw
Hmm.
that, I was actually being driven from one speaking engagement to a whole different part of the state to speak at another campaign event. And so I responded, and this went on for a few minutes. We went back and forth on
Hmm.
Twitter,
Wow.
and and then once I said what I needed to say, which was the real reason that he was endorsing my opponent, which I don't think he ever got around to the actual endorsement. He just, used that to slam
Yeah.
me and to, vilify me because of that. So, these are the things that
Yeah.
most of us who are in politics and are in it for the right reasons, these are the things that we have to deal with.
Mia, last question, kind of the big sum up. What's the lasting lesson here as you remember this disagreement over nepotism?
The lesson for me was to always do the right thing, even if I have to face criticism and all of the backlash, if you will. I'm not the first, and I'm sure I won't be the last. But it's important to me to do the right thing, even if I have to do it by myself, and even if I have to do it afraid, because um, at the end of the day,
Hmm.
I ran for office because I want to serve. I want to serve the people of my district and my state, and I've done that well. And sometimes when you're in it for the right reasons, the people who have other motives and other things that they want and expect from you, they lash out, and we have to be willing to accept that and do it anyway.
Mia McLeod, thank you so much for being on When We Disagree.
Thank you for having me. It's been my honor to be with you today. Thank you.
When We Disagree is recorded at the College of Charleston with creator and host Michael Lee. Recording and sound engineering by Jesse Kunz and Lance Laidlaw. Reach out to us at whenwedisagree@gmail.com.